You mentioned something about the diamond-shaped approach.
Yes. If you're not sure about something, you need to increase your knowledge about it firsthand.
Yep.
And that's all about that diamond, right? So the shape of a diamond opens up.
Yep.
And to get more clarity, what you want to do is close off that diamond. Narrow it down. And my number one biggest period where I really applied that was when I realized I didn't really want to pursue med. And I remember getting backlash on social media for like switching med and because all those things, right? But at the end of the day, I wanted to do it for me. And if I had the right reasoning, that was okay with me. I kind of wanted to be like a med vlogger at that point of time as well. And I always had an interest in content and creating content and everything. So I was like, I can do both. Try be honest with yourself in terms of, is it a societal pressure? Like, does it just look good?
I highly relate to that in the medical world because...
Yes.
Yeah.
They think you're not putting in...
Do you think that when it comes to the opportunities that you've had, especially early on, do you think social media and content creation and having a personal brand helped? Welcome back to Endoscope, the educational podcast where we look into the guts of various different topics and explore things that matter to those interested in education, career development, healthcare, and business. My name is Harry and I'm a fifth-year medical student. Joining me today in Wellington is Bismah Mahmood, an icon in the New Zealand social media world. Today, we'll be discussing her journey through different career pathways, how she transitioned her goals from a career in medicine to the tech sector, some challenges she faced, and skills and mindsets that has helped her along the way. Bismah, lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time, by the way.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. So let's just start off by having a brief background introduction. If you could give us a 10-second intro of yourself, what's your name, what you do, and where you're from.
Yeah, 100%. So my name is Bismah, and I am a full-time business analyst in the New Zealand Defence Force currently. I recently graduated. I've switched my career pathway or goals multiple times. I also dabble in social media on the side, so I kind of do that on a part-time basis or just whenever I can, and that's just my creative side to things.
Interesting. Yeah, so lots of different kind of careers, pathways coming together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about your upbringing then. So you born here in New Zealand or were you born overseas and grew up here?
So I was born and raised in New Zealand. My parents came here, I want to say like 2000? From Pakistan. And they got married in Pakistan and had their 3 kids here. So They were navigating the Western world all by themselves.
Absolutely. So how does having a sort of an immigrant background influence your career development or career choice?
I feel like there is a lot of societal pressure from a cultural perspective in terms of being successful, kind of knowing what you want. My parents always did a very good job of nurturing my creative side, but they also really made sure that the importance of having a career pathway set and, trying well at school and everything, that was very important in the household. My dad is a professor, so academia was always like top priority. In terms of like the immigrant culture, I grew up around a lot of doctors, engineers, and lawyers.
Yep.
And there wasn't really much exposure to anything outside of that, even within school. Like I remember during high school, like I didn't know anything else besides the sciences and English and math and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can relate in terms of like being of East Asian background and having that kind of upbringing. There's almost like you either become a doctor or there's engineering or there's law. You there's like a handful of careers that you go into. Yeah, and as an Asian person, an Asian family upbringing, its stability is quite emphasized. I'm not sure if that's the same from sort of like a brown background.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Because it's like the hustler mentality of being an immigrant. You see that growing up with your parents. And so you almost learn that through just visually watching your parents growing up. So the importance of stability is definitely there as compared to other families or kids that I knew growing up.
I've done my due diligence and watched a few of your TED Talks and other videos online. You mentioned something about the diamond-shaped approach.
Yes.
Do you mind explaining that and elaborating that? And can you talk a bit about how it relates to your change in career from wanting to become a doctor to tech?
100%. So in high school, I was very, very involved in design and visual communication as a subject. One of the design principles in just around the world is this diamond-shaped approach. And it's all about...
From design?
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. From just like design principles and stuff.
Sure.
But I remember thinking about that principle in a different way, where I was trying to figure out if I can use that and apply it to my own life. I have this common tendency to do that in whatever I kind of try learning. So I remember going into my design and visual communication classes and coming across this diamond-shaped approach, but I took it and spun it my own way. And I kind of, in my own words, my understanding of this diamond-shaped approach is essentially, if you're not sure about something, you need to increase your exposure to something to really get and like increase your knowledge about it firsthand.
Yep.
And that's all about that diamond, right? So the shape of a diamond opens up.
Yep.
And to get more clarity, what you want to do is close off that diamond. Narrow it down. So I kind of applied that thinking to when I felt periods of uncertainty growing up. And my number one biggest period where I really applied that was when I realized I didn't really want to pursue med, because that was something I was working towards for like my entirety of high school and school, right?
Yeah.
So applying the diamond-shaped approach went something along the lines of, I don't know what to do, so let me just try increase my exposure to different types of things, hobbies. I started showing up to like all sorts of things throughout uni. And then I did some reflecting and actually tried to narrow my focus and see what I actually liked and disliked.
By all sorts of things, do you mean like career events or
career events,
different
workshops,
departments, things like that?
Yeah, career events, workshops. I remember I started dabbling in like property finance, investing. Like I just tried to learn everything and anything.
Yeah.
I always had an interest in content creation as well. So I was still dabbling in that a little bit throughout pre-med as well.
Yep.
And I remember having like this sit down with myself and like actually reflecting on what I actually enjoyed. And that's where that diamond-shaped approach is kind of narrowing off.
Yeah.
So it's like a broad way of thinking.
Sure.
When you're feeling a bit stuck in life.
Yep. So kind of like expand out and explore, and then once you kind of found something, start narrowing it down. And how do you exactly narrow it down?
It's more so, I think it really depends on what period of your life you're in, for example. So even when I started working in tech, there are so many different possibilities in tech, and I felt quite confused. Like within tech, you can be a software developer, front end, back end, you can be a product designer, you can be a project manager, you can be business analyst, IT, infrastructure,
Don't
security,
you kind of get
right?
an identity crisis when it comes to that? Because there's so many things that you could go into, and you...
Exactly. So even maybe with med, you kind of need to specialize even further, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you do have to reflect even more and actually understand what you actually enjoy and what not. And also try be honest with yourself in terms of, is it a societal pressure? Like, does it just look good? Or if it is, like, just acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Or is it something you actually enjoy and you can see yourself sticking to and having some sort of like passion, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there isn't like a dead set number of questions that you should be asking. I think it's just about making the time to sit down and reflect.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure. And so getting a bit more into the details now then, how did you get to where you are now, from pre-med to working in real estate, tech kind of, Ray White real estate kind of, and then you had a startup of your own, Sisterhood?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also working in corporate Big Four, I remember it's last year, I think. Yeah. And at the same time being a full-time student.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think the diamond-shaped approach really did help me in a lot of different ways. But in terms of how that journey actually went, I'll just give like a quick summary.
Yeah.
So I came out of high school, applied to pre-med, did biomedical sciences.
We're in the same year, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I
exactly.
did remember your first your first not the first video, but the first video about Premed popped up on my YouTube homepage, and we'll link that up in the description here if you want to go and check it out. I found it interesting. So
I remember wanting to consciously make an effort to kind of film my experience as well, because I kind of wanted to be like a med vlogger at that point of time as well. And I always had an interest in content and creating content and everything, so I was like, I can do both. So I went into like my first year with that mindset of like, let me just continue to like experiment with content. I started off with YouTube, which is probably the video you saw. Slowly towards mid that year, I was more on TikTok, mainly because I just didn't have time to do YouTube, right? But yeah, also mid through that year, I realized I wasn't really that good with the practical side of med, and I didn't quite enjoy it. I really enjoyed the theory. Like, I loved the content so much. It was really interesting to me. But when it came to the labs and stuff, I didn't feel that engaged, and I felt quite gruesome about like some of the labs. Like, I was like, oh, I don't think I can do this for the rest of my life, kind of thing. So I started to have those internal doubts and realizing that actually maybe what I wanted is not actually what I really want.
Sort of uncertainty at the back of your mind.
I was kind of, and I kind of went into this like, let me just do some planning just in case this doesn't work out. So I subconsciously always had that at the back of my head, like midway through the year. But I wanted to stick to it because I wanted to finish off that year, essentially. And also because I didn't really have a plan B at that point either. But yeah, I went into the second half of that year wanting to explore my options and see if I can get more exposure to things. So I predominantly went to a lot of uni events and started talking to older students. And I also started making friends outside of the med kind of circle. And I found that I did a lot of learning just through doing that. I learned a lot about myself. I learned I really love like numbers and like really technical things. So I leaned into doing something like computer science. So actually, if I go back a little bit, I managed to get a job in Ray White over that summer after finishing my first year. And that gave me exposure to the working world. So I was a real estate business assistant, which honestly, there isn't really a defined role as to what you actually do. But I did everything from like systems, marketing, communication, client management, key drop-offs, like everything. And I had a really, really good understanding of like the inside... I guess like the internal business model.
Good exposure.
Really good exposure.
Absolutely.
And I realized I really enjoyed systems, people, tech, and property in a lot of different ways, right? But again, property, I didn't really see myself being a real estate agent, so I was like, no. And then I decided, comp sci is what I actually want to switch into.
Sure. So you finished the pre-med first year, then you switch into... starting, would you say, pretty much fresh off for computer science?
Yeah, I had already enrolled into computer science, but I wasn't quite sure of it 100%.
Sure.
So real estate and my role in real estate kind of confirmed my choice a little bit more. But I also had an identity crisis during comp sci as well, because I realized comp sci is actually not as straightforward as maybe it is shown online. So there are so many different career pathways with comp sci. You can be like a developer or like designer and all the other different things I talked about earlier, right? I started realizing I didn't actually want to sit behind a computer screen and code all day. I wanted a bit more of a people element, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do med as well. So you see how all these little things I'm constantly reflecting, and driving my decision making, but also still staying on, like, I'm not doing a complete 180 and doing something like, I don't know, like,
I mean, both ends of the spectrum equally as unattractive, right? Like, you have
it's like that balance,
completely 180, or people who ignore how they feel or how they
It's all about the
uncertainty.
reasoning.
Yeah.
It's all about the reasoning and the intent by as to what you're doing. And I remember getting backlash on social media for like switching med and because all those things, right? But at the end of the day, I knew that that's what I'm not going to just do it because a couple of people are like, why would you change? Like, I wanted to do it for me. And if I had the right reasoning, that was okay with me.
How did you get onto establishing a startup?
Yes. So while I was doing comp sci, there's a big component of getting portfolio experience and work experience and not solely just doing like coding and theory. Sure. You have to build up this portfolio when you actually go apply to companies. And as part of that, I decided to just get really involved in the startup community. So prior to creating my own startup, I just volunteered a lot of other startups. And I was always in the engineering building and Unleash space and everything. And they have a pretty good startup community there. I just got to know everyone. Yeah. And I slowly just learnt a lot of different things as to how startups work. And I also volunteered my time a lot. And
excuse me, was that all? Does every computer science student have to do some sort of startup, or
no, they don't.
Was it your choice?
I had the realization that building a portfolio would be really beneficial to me because I essentially didn't have too much coding experience, so I was almost trying to catch up in my own different way, in my own way, right? And I'd recommend getting a portfolio regardless of if you're in tech in any sort of way. Like if you're in systems or business analytics or if you're solely software.
By portfolio, what do you mean exactly?
So it's almost like, it's like a CV, but not really. You essentially are displaying pieces of work that you've been working on, like projects and stuff that you've been involved in. Yep. And what I like to look at it is it's like a supplementary to my CV. Sure.
It's like, for example, I'm trying to do a startup now and I'm trying to obviously bootstrap it. And so there's
it's almost like your pitch. Yeah, it's like your pitch deck.
I'm trying to get software developers who's trying to build a portfolio to do it for a lower price or cheaper price. And that's what that means, right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Sure. It's essentially like your pitch deck, but a lot of people just call it portfolio. Sure. You can build a portfolio in it can be many different forms. It could either be like a PDF pack, PowerPoint pack, or it can be a full-blown website, whatever. The idea is that it's displaying your work and, I guess, expertise in a different way other than your CV. And some good visuals are usually quite good for that. Sure. Going back to...
Yeah, how did you get started to work in the Big Four accounting firms?
Yeah, and then there was this... I think it was a timing thing for me in particular when I started computer science. Sure. The world was moving towards work from home kind of scenarios. Absolutely. There were a lot more opportunities for young people to get involved in tech programs and apprenticeships. I remember I was at a startup party almost, like it's like a monthly club membership party kind of thing, and I was tapped on the shoulder by a recruiter to apply for this apprenticeship opportunity in corporate, essentially. Sure. And that very week I had a referral, I had my CV sorted and a portfolio, and I sent it off to the PwC apprenticeship program, essentially. And I got a really, really fast response rate because of it. And it was just like the timing of things and where the world was at and where the economy was at. That's honestly how it is. At the moment, there's probably not as many apprenticeship and programs available. And that's simply just because of the economy. So I use those opportunities and leverage that to speed up my time in my, just speed up, essentially. And then I got into corporate. I spent about 2 years in corporate while also studying, but I made it very clear to them that I was studying and I wanted to prioritize balancing the two. So it wasn't ever the case of I'm hiding the fact that I'm going to uni or anything, because I've seen some people overseas do that, which is really weird. But yeah, as long as you're honest about your priorities and stuff, usually people are okay with you working and studying. Sure. And if you make it clear that you only maybe want to work 3 days a week or something, and that's the time that they will have undivided attention.
Yep.
It's really good to set that expectation early. So I remember going into that, telling them that, you know, I'll do this full time for a bit, but I want to be work from home so I can balance my studies. And then I went to 3 days a week. So that touches on your question around how did I balance it?
Yeah.
Right? So you have to really set that expectation and make sure everyone that needs to be informed is informed. Otherwise, you're going to come across as not the most honest person, which is what, like, reputation, that you need to be able to build up your reputation. So
Absolutely.
Communication is definitely key.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I applied to my job right now, which is a business analyst. So in my in corporate, I was a technology consultant, and so I wasn't really coding too much. It was more so I was the person that could do a lot of the front end coding,
Sure.
but also I communicated with the clients heavily in terms of what they wanted to get out of the piece of work that we were doing. So I was like that bridge between the back end software team and the client.
Customer.
Yeah, the customer. And that gives you really good skills. And I realized that it's actually quite similar to a business analyst as well, which is why I went into my current role. And that is all about logistics in the Defence Force. So it's very different in a lot of different ways, but there's always some level of similarity in terms of my next step.
Seems like you've dipped your toes in all sorts of industries and realms now.
But it's really, really beneficial because I feel like I've been able to get a lot of exposure at quite a young age. Like, I'm like, 22 now? I sometimes have to think about it, but most of my workplace is like minimum age like 30, right? So like, I feel like if you look at your life in almost like this agile way, you can get a lot done.
Yeah.
And you don't have to overstress yourself. Like, I definitely think balance is really important. And if you have the right techniques and like mindset to go into things and not get swayed by people too much, you should be fine.
Do you think that when it comes to the opportunities that you've had, especially early on, do you think social media and content creation and having a personal brand helped?
Kind of. I feel like it really helped me get referrals. But when it came to actually, like, when it comes to reputation within companies, it's almost frowned upon to have your own side hustles.
Okay.
So I remember being in corporate, for example, and I remember I always had to have some level of like, I almost had to be hyper aware of what I did outside the office because of the impression it may have on the bigger boss, which is a bit weird to say, but that is corporate culture.
I highly relate to that in the medical world because
they think you're not putting in your full attention
in the industry that you're supposed to be putting in 100% effort in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It comes off in a bad way, which I'm like, you're allowed to have a life and hobbies outside of work. But I think content creation almost has this perception, especially in New Zealand, for being like a really big like hustle kind of like hobby that people think it takes away from your day job, especially in like corporate and maybe like traditional working things like even med, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I did struggle with that in corporate in terms of like, it was almost like a negative, but to get my foot in the door, it was definitely a positive. Like, I always got good referrals and I always got a lot of referrals just from the mere reach that social media gave.
But then even when people, they just look at you and think that you do social media and they might have a slight negative impression on you.
Preconceived notion.
But then when they meet you, you're actually really nice. But that's what happens to me in the medical industry. You know, when people work with me, I'm actually a really enthusiastic and hardworking and dedicated individual. Yeah, so,
100%. I think I remember I hopped onto TikTok, for example, really early in the game, and it was like being a TikToker during like the time I was a TikToker was like, people just thought you were really stuck up and snobby. And I remember my sister would come back to me and be like, oh, these people are talking about you, and they thought maybe you ignored them. I was like, what do you mean? Did they say hi? They were like, nope. I was like, that's not on me then, you know? So there is that notion, especially earlier on, I want to say like even 2020, it was pretty much like if you're an influencer, it's like negative connotations. So I've almost like, I prefer the term content creator because it almost doesn't spark the negative connotations as much.
Absolutely.
And I don't usually refer to myself as influencer too much because it brings upon too many assumptions. Even though I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's a difference in social media channels as well. Like some channels, for example, TikToks compared to Instagram, probably not as negative, and then YouTube's even better. But still, there's some people that's would frown upon. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I want to talk about being female in the workforce.
Yes.
And how does that affect you in terms of getting opportunities and obviously dipping your toes in all realms of different industries, and how does that, if you could talk about that, that would be great.
Yeah. In terms of being female, I think there isn't really a strong female presence, especially in the classroom when it comes to tech. So I remember going into most of my labs and stuff when it came to computer science or IT or anything related to tech. And I'd be like one of 3 girls. So there is like the majority being men. But when it came to my experience in corporate, I think I was pretty lucky in the sense that my team had a high majority of women. And so I didn't feel like there was too much of like a disconnect or inequality as many other workplaces have. In my current workplace, however, there aren't as many women, but I feel like my early experiences with corporate and having a strong female kind of group gave me a lot of confidence, and it kind of eliminated that whole imposter syndrome and those very normal feelings that you have when you have your first big job or something. And so I was able to go into this job with a lot more confidence and not feeling like, I don't know what I'm talking about kind of thing. There is this tendency for women to not really sell themselves as much when it comes to, if a man was to walk into a room, maybe a networking event versus a woman by herself, women have a tendency to not really talk about themselves, or because it's almost like this imposter syndrome feeling. Whereas a man will be this is like a very broad kind of generalization. And they're more comfortable with kind of putting themselves out there. So the confidence element definitely, I feel like, has to be nurtured. So
it's also a bit difficult if you're different to most people in the room, right?
Yes. Yeah. And there's also that whole like people of color element as well. Absolutely. That comes into it. And there's almost like a tendency to want to prove yourself. To who though? Like it just feels it's like this internal mindset that you kind of have to break. Like, if you're aware of these things, and have these realizations, you realize that it's all just about confidence.
Totally. We're nearing the end now. So, any advice that you have for young people trying to choose careers or trying to make money, perhaps we're kind of in the hustlers age now. Everyone's trying to start something on the side or trying to build their own portfolio. Any advice? I
think it's literally just try different things, and like if you have a job already, you can still try different things on the side. Like, and if you're in uni, definitely try different things. Like I feel like it's a really good environment to do that. You will meet a lot of different people with different mindsets, and you'll open yourself up to new ideas. In New Zealand especially, it's about who you know and not what you know, when you're trying new things especially. So I definitely think get as much exposure as you can, but maybe set some like 3-month like sessions with yourself to kind of reflect and understand what you've enjoyed, what you enjoy, what you maybe see yourself like sticking to in the future. There's that whole thing of like passion as well goes into it, but you also have to be able to stick to it. If I did content creation full time, the passion element would slowly kind of deteriorate a little bit.
Yeah,
so that's why I
don't
actively
see you as much on TikTok recently
at the
anymore,
moment I'm trying to focus on work because I'm quite new.
Sure.
So in terms of my priority, I want to almost make sure that my presence at work is really established before I go back into doing more social media, right? But I also enjoy social media more when it's not my full-time thing.
Yeah.
I'm just aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah. It's like, no matter how much you enjoy something, sometimes if you are told to do it full-time, 50 hours a week, you're not going to enjoy it as much as you do it on the side, sort of 10, 15 hours a week, right?
100%. Like, you have to have an element of being able to stick to it.
Yeah.
So that's why I think reflecting and being honest with yourself is really, really important. So try different things and just be honest with yourself. Yeah.
Good point about the networking aspect as well, because
Yes.
I do realize that there is a bit of a nepotism in terms of opportunities
Yes.
and getting jobs, and it's more
100%.
about who's vetting for you kind of thing.
Yes, it is. Yeah, especially for young people in this economy as well.
Yeah.
It's very helpful to have mentors and referrals, and you can have multiple mentors. I have different mentors for different aspects of life. I have mentors
that was the next question, by the way.
Oh, perfect.
Did you have a mentor or network or someone who's there to guide you across all of these, jumping through all of these different careers?
100%. Like, I definitely think having mentors is really, really helpful. I have a mentor at work. I have a mentor for my, like, I don't know, personal problems in terms of, like, not problems, but personal advice in terms of finance and things and all those things. I also have a mentor for just a lot of female empowerment stuff that I like getting involved with, and also content creation. So you're allowed to have multiple mentors. It won't disrespect the other mentor if you go and find another one. There are a lot of people willing to pass on their knowledge, and we have an aging population as well. And I personally think that's great because there's a lot more people wanting to leave a legacy.
Yeah.
So definitely strike up a conversation, and don't be too transactional.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And how do you find these people?
LinkedIn is great, but that's why I think if you're in uni, it's like the best way to do it is like go to events. Like, it's all Kiwis love events, and I don't personally drink, but Kiwis love drinking and so like casual events, right? So you can actually get a lot of opportunities in casual events and not just professional events. Professional events are great as well, but I think just with Kiwi culture, I've actually found more opportunities through just casual, just like bigger events. Yeah.
Sure. And final question, just before we finish. Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
I don't like 5-year plans for me personally,
Sure.
but I
Cross
think
the bridge when we get there?
Yeah, cross the bridge when we get there, but I do have a broad idea or goal for myself in terms of, like, I definitely probably wouldn't be in New Zealand. Like, I know that. I feel like I'm going to go a little bit more global or more towards a different country.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to try specialize more in terms of logistics, technology, and marketing.
Yep.
So I know that those are my 3 niches that I really, really enjoy. Yeah.
How about outside of your career?
Outside of my career,
We've been talking about career for the last
100%.
40 minutes, so...
I have a lot of big gym goals. I do want to dabble in some new different types of sports and stuff as well. So I'm very...
How we met. We met
Yes.
at 2 a.m. at the gym.
Exactly.
There's only 2 of us at the same gym. And for some reason...
Yeah, exactly. Also make friends at the gym. It's actually quite good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do have a lot of goals for myself at the gym because health is really important to me. The way you feel definitely drives you better, and you just feel a lot better. You look a lot better. And I think that's probably it. Like,
any plans for family?
Not
Thinking about it yet?
Not thinking about it yet too much, but also, like, I really prioritize family, and I keep my personal life quite separate. So for me, it's like I do prioritize making time with family. I do live away from them, but I do call them, and, I spend like a week or so every month with them. And that's probably way more than most young people do. So yeah.
Have a good balance in everything.
There's always like room to improve.
Yeah, there's always room to improve. Yeah, good point to end the podcast.
Yes.
So, Bismah, thank you very much for coming. It's already getting dark outside, so it's a bit of a time lapse, I'd say. But that's okay.
It was a beautiful view as well. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. So if any of you guys watching wants to check out Bismah's social media, TikTok, YouTube channel, I'll have the link down in the description below. And any final words?
No, I think you've done a beautiful job. Thank you for having me. And also I'm very active and open to giving any sort of like support to young people. So probably best way is LinkedIn for me. I don't usually check messages and stuff on other platforms as much, just to filter out the noise, you know.
She's the queen.
Yeah.
All right.
So are you. You're a king.
Otherwise, stay fit, stay strong, stay positive, and I'll see you in the next one.
Okay.
Cool.
Good job. Yay.
This is good.
That was good.
Ooh.
That went fast.
Let me just save this.
Hopefully that came out the way you wanted it.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Like in terms of sound, video and everything.
Sound's always gonna be decent. These costed quite a lot, but
I was like,
pretty good.
I'm like, don't touch it, because I use my hands a lot and I didn't realize.
Yeah. All right.